What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? Oh my god.
Those are the ones who I'm pissed off that they don't seem to give a shit. Mr. Lee, we want you to take control of this situation. Lead us. Tell us what you need us to do. Tell us what you need to do, and we will follow your orders. What do you do? What do you say to them? That
Well,
would be.
I would like to say it's more than just being possible, right? I mean, possible is a pretty low standard for anything. I would say it's likely.
Assisted suicide. Why should we be helping people to commit suicide? Do you really stand by that you think that killing yourself is the most dignified way of dying? All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Athan Yanos Show. I'm joined by Filip Karaivanov and Anshan Lee. If you do not know them, well, you should, because they're in many episodes and you can find out more about them on the Honorable Host page. Today, we are going to be discussing 4 topics: a kidnapping in Nigeria, gang violence in Haiti and El Salvador, 3, an assisted suicide bill in the UK, and 4, restrictions on Japanese tourism in Kyoto. So we're going to start.
Before we begin, I would like to congratulate you on 100 subscribers.
Thank you. Thank you. We're at 120 now, actually.
100. Well, there we go.
And 20,000 total views. So we're building pace. We're going to get to that 500 benchmark pretty soon, I think. So subscribe if you haven't already. Yes, that being said, we're going to get started with the Nigeria case. So this is the way it's going to work. I'm going to read a couple stories. I'm going to read a couple headlines, details from a story, and then we're going to chat about it, and then we'll move on to the next story and just repeat the process. So that's how it's going to go. So first story, this is from CNN, but obviously a lot of other news organizations have covered it. Last Thursday, at least 287 school children, some as young as 8 years old, are being held by gunmen who raided their school in Nigeria's northwestern Kaduna state early Thursday. Students were kidnapped from the premises on Thursday morning around 8 a.m. local time, and about 287 students are still in the hands of bandits, 100 from the primary side, 187 from the secondary side. Over 300 students were initially kidnapped, but some were rescued. The governor of the Kaduna state, Uba Sani, said in a statement, the government is doing everything they can to ensure the safe return of the pupils and students. The Kaduna state, which borders the Nigerian capital, Abuja, to the southwest, has grappled with recurring incidents of kidnappings and mass abductions. As I said, they're continuing to search for the students in forests, and they've set up roadblocks to help find them. They haven't yet, but the search is ongoing. In addition, 15 children were also abducted in another raid in the region of Sokoto 2 days after on Saturday. And more than 200 people, mostly women and children, were taken in another kidnapping in the Borno region last week. So this is a recurrence. No group has claimed responsibility for the school abductions, but militant jihadists have been waging an insurgency in the northeast of Nigeria, and they are suspected of the kidnapping. I should note the kind of famous kidnapping that got everybody's attention worldwide was in 2014 when the Islamist militant group Boko Haram kidnapped 250 school girls in the Borno state. Okay. Also, more than 3,500 people have been abducted across Nigeria in the last year, and the Nigerian armed forces have been fighting this with over 40,000 people dead as a result, and displaced 2 million people. Also of note, I think I should say, Nigeria has the most persecuted Christians. They persecute the most Christians out of any country in the world. So yeah, Christians in particular have been subject of Islamist militant attacks in Nigeria, particularly in the north and central side. I don't know if this particular kidnapping in the Kaduna state was a Christian school, but what I will say is there was an attack in December of 2023 by Islamist militant groups that killed 200 Christians in Nigeria and in the Plateau State region of Nigeria. And if you look at a map of Nigeria, which I'll put up on the video, the Plateau and the Kaduna State are right next to each other. So it's possible that they were targeting that school because it was Christian. I don't know that. That's speculation. But yes. Okay, I've done a lot of talking. So now I'm going to turn it over to either of you guys. Do you have any initial reactions or thoughts on the story?
Well, one initial reaction, which probably needs to be clarified for me, is it said that the kidnappings occur for ransom demands, but also that no group has claimed responsibility for the school abduction. So I would think if it is just for ransom, then presumably they would claim responsibility to so people know who to give the ransom to. So maybe that's just not part of the story here, but that's one of the initial things I noticed.
So you're saying that usually the kidnappings are for ransom, but this time, because nobody's claimed responsibility, it's probably not for ransom, because if they wanted ransom, they would have claimed responsibility, so they know who to give the ransom to.
Yeah, that seems like an inconsistency if the only purpose is for ransom, and I would imagine there probably is some other purpose, maybe more nefarious than simply money, involved in this. And yeah, I would assume, I mean, kidnapping with people, children, or adults also involves not just ransom, obviously, especially if it's such a large scale. There might be trafficking going on. There might be some other operations which do not require them to claim responsibility for it, because actually that would be detrimental for their purpose if it's something else. So I think there probably is a lot more things involved here than just what was stated in the article.
Anshan, do you have any opinion?
I was thinking about the same thing. There's not only some inconsistency within this report, but there are some inconsistency within your argument. I can't see
My argument?
Yes,
I didn't make an argument.
Oh, you are speculating the kidnapping is somehow indirectly linked to those religious conflicts between the Muslim school and the Christian.
Yeah, I think it's possible
due to the geography as well.
Geography, yeah, but also the fact that the majority of attacks in Nigeria have been against Christians by Muslim militant groups. So
it's a reasonable speculation.
It's possible. I don't know for sure. It's speculation.
Of course, it's speculation, and you're making an argument on this speculation.
I'm not making an argument. I'm saying it's possible.
Okay, I'm just saying that.
Tell me why the speculation is wrong.
I didn't say it's wrong. I just said you can't build any of your current analysis on those speculated past events, because in that case, I can hardly see, if I'm a military leader, what will I gain from kidnapping hundreds of kids from a school that will just put me in a very disadvantaged situation if I want to raise some kind of military conflict.
Well, so what I understand about Nigeria, I'm not an expert, is that the north is predominantly Muslim controlled, and the south is predominantly Christian, and then so the north is generally governed by Sharia law. And there are still some Christians there, and those are the ones who get persecuted the most, and the south is more Christian related. So I don't have specific reasons why people commit crimes against religious groups, but I'm assuming it's not just a purely rational um, thing. It's religiously driven, like it's a hatred for.
I thank you for that clarification. But if you're going to say you're just speculating, it might be the case. You need to state it in the very beginning. Otherwise, your audience might think, oh, you are suggesting it could be the case, whereas there's no concrete evidence.
Yeah, look, somebody who has more access to this information should do a report and tell us what the nature of this school was. That
Well,
would be
I would like to say it's more than just being possible, right? I mean, possible is a pretty low standard for anything. We can say it's likely that this is the case, because it even says in the article that from people who are there, right, they claim that attacks on Christians happen regularly from Boko Haram and other groups, and also the Sahara region is famous for being at the moment unstable, especially more than the west coast of Africa. So I would say it's likely. As far as why would people target Christians, I think, of course, there's some religious hatred in the world, but there's also, I think, a lot of these attacks are quite instrumental, right, for profit. So I don't think it's all just random attacks on Christians. I think the picking a religion to go against is just part of the cover of actual criminal activities, because a lot of criminals would use the religious opinions of the people in the area, right, to present it as something else, as a wider move or protest against something. But I think a lot of this would just be motivated by criminal activity for profit.
I want to ask you guys because, interestingly enough, you might be listening to this and did not hear this happen. It wasn't like the front page of the news or the cover story on the newspapers. But I imagine if this happened in like Spain or this happened in I don't know, Poland or somewhere else, this would be like everywhere, right?
Indeed.
And you would have marches in the streets demanding their release, and there would be all of these things. I bet you if you went outside or in Edinburgh and asked people, did you hear what happened to Nigeria? Most people would be like, no. Why do you like? Obviously, there's some geographical biases, but I also think there is like something else happening. Like, why do you think people just don't care, or it just is not as interesting to people?
I think you've just pointed out that for those reporters, they have to do some more in-depth research about the nature of the school. It's just because I would propose that Western media usually do not. I think it's
Just talking to the mic, yeah.
oh, it's because Western media still have those colonized view that they are the center and therefore they do not really care about those ignorant and I would say really horrifying story. Ignorant children and happen.
It's a terrible story.
Yes, it's really a terrible story, but we just don't have the opportunity as individual to express our concerns and our view on those issues because, well, on the one hand, it's because of media. On the other hand, it's because we are trapped by those algorithms that keep us being interested in those tiny issues. I don't know how to describe.
No, but it actually pisses me off because there is like so much attention about like very small issues, happening, right? Obviously, the Israel-Palestine is not a small issue, but there is other marches frequently about, all kinds of, things are happening, they're trying to do this, trying to do that, and it's like very local stuff. And I totally understand that. But then you have groups that are like rah human rights and justice and equality, right? And all of these stuff. And those are the ones who I'm pissed off that they don't seem to give a shit.
Yeah, so I would say like for the normal person, I mean, like a normal person in Western countries, this is geographically removed from them. It also seems to be a frequent occurrence. So like I don't think a normal person would. There's nothing really that they can do. I think people feel disempowered, if that's the right term. I mean, when you keep hearing these stories on the news about distant countries where this sort of thing happens, and you can't really do anything there because, of course, as soon as we start talking about doing anything there, there's all sort of problems. Right? To what extent would you have to be involved there to help the people in need, and how would that affect the country, and would it really be helping the country overall? So there's a lot of these problems that immediately arise, which are serious problems, and that's why I think most people don't talk about it in the media. And for the normal person, it would just be, it just wouldn't be relevant to them, right? I mean, obviously that sounds harsh because it's a moral issue, but I mean, a normal person doesn't always hear the news. Like in our contemporary times, we can hear the news about all the countries in the world, right? From which are completely distant from us. In the past, obviously, it wasn't the case. So I think that's the boring answer, if you will, as to why people don't really care about it. But I think your points about to what extent the media chooses what to report and what things to make us care about, that's an interesting thing, as well as the human organizations, human rights organizations, which purport to obviously help people in these countries in need.
And I will say, like, we will have to care about Nigeria at a certain point because they're the largest economy in Africa, and they are projected by 2050 to be the third most populous country in the world.
I'm so sad to hear that the criteria you're judging something is important or not. It's not based on their human rights. It's not based on their children's life. It's based on their economy.
But I'm saying that, like, what I'm saying that in response to what Filip is saying about, like, it's not impacting the everyday individual, right? It's not impacting their lives, but it's a growing country of immense importance that in the next 30, 40 years is going to become incredibly important geopolitically. And so, like, I agree with you that we should care because of the human lives. I do, but I'm saying that in terms of people being forced to care, I think this is a country where people will be forced to care about it.
That's a very good point.
In the future.
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's also one of the highest rising populations in the world. So, of course, it's of interest to countries. And I think obviously countries do keep up with this and care about it. But the initial question which you posed is, why is it not so prevalent in the media and the relation to ordinary people? And that's what I was trying to answer. But yeah, for geopolitical concerns, obviously, it's important. But I would say that's for actually most countries are important in those terms.
Okay, why don't we move on to the next story? Which this is going to be a little long, guys.
I actually wanted to ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
A question, because it was brought up for the Christians who were there. To what extent do you guys think that other nations should be involved in helping the Christians, right, who are being, let's say, persecuted, if the report here and the general things that we're talking about are true?
I'll put this back in a different way. Do you think if the situation was reversed and it was the Nigeria had the highest rate of Muslim persecution in the world, do you think that Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Iran and Syria and Iraq would all be to the defense of them and up in arms? Because I think they would.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know, but I would hope they would, because obviously this sort of thing matters. I think on a state level, but especially in like America and the Western countries now, there is this idea that the religion should be like completely separate from state and political issues. So I think that's why there's a hesitance there to actually talk about this. But obviously, there's the other argument, which is that freedom of religion, and this would classify as a refugee, right? This would classify as persecution. So yeah, I don't know how they would. So you would say there would have to be imposing some sort of pressure on
I,
the government in Nigeria. Is that what you mean?
I think there would be a much more forthright response than the majority of, like you said, like the US or the UK or France is giving in this situation. And I think you're right. Part of it is like the UK, US, France, they're not Christian nations in the same way that Saudi Arabia and Iran and uh, Egypt are like, Islam is I think it's the official state religion.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting. I don't know because I don't know how many cases there have been of countries actually getting involved with other countries because of a close bond that they share based exclusively on religion. And I think it depends on how much the religion pervades the culture. Um, right. So like we see sometimes that in Eastern Europe with Russia kind of feeling solidarity with like Serbia, for example, because of a mutual culture and a mutual religion. So I would say when there are those kind of ties, it has like ramifications for countries in general. But I guess my point here was more like a moral point about and a practical point about how much should those countries be involved, right? I was open to all countries, but your point is true that it's especially pertinent to countries which are or used to be Christian. Maybe not explicitly nowadays, but still based on some of those values, right? So you would expect them to have some sort of a reaction, like we are at the moment having a reaction when we're reading this.
I mean, look, both candidates to be the next president for the U.S., Joe Biden and Donald Trump, talk a lot about how they're Christian and how important it is to them. So if it really is that important to them, then persecution of Christians should also be very important to them.
I can't see the point.
You don't see the point?
No.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's the same actually with Russia because like Putin recently was talking about how he was asked about. Obviously, he's saying he's also Orthodox and he's also Christian. So it's like if we do have Christian leaders, it's just an interesting question of how much should that actually affect them, because obviously there's other problems about the church and the state being separate, or a very American notion there. But there is these things are all playing in tandem with each other, and it's interesting to what extent should this be acted on. But I think there's another point, which is that it's not just for Christians. Obviously, I think that these countries would try to uphold, like America would try to uphold human rights for all religions because it's holding to some sort of a principle, not just for the Christian people who are being persecuted in Nigeria, for instance.
Although they do tend to pick and choose a lot.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about like obviously the principle is not being applied in all cases everywhere. I think that's the general thing we've been trying to say for the past 20 minutes was that it's underreported and it's not emphasized enough, and it's strange that it's not being as emphasized as other points and other conflicts.
I'm just thinking before we jump to the next topic, we need to clarify that the kidnapping happening in Nigeria have not been identified nor been in any way referred to some religious crime against Christianity or against Christian groups.
Yes.
In this news report.
Yes. Yeah. That is true.
And
that's a good point. That was speculation, but it is true. It is a fact that Nigeria is like Christians are persecuted the most out of any place in Nigeria. That is a fact.
I look forward for the next topic.
Yeah. All right. This got a little bit more attention in the news.
Yeah, I have a theory why that's the case.
Well, the French and the U.S. have their foot on the throat of Haiti, or have had their foot on the throat of Haiti. But okay, so criminal gangs, this is from CBS News. Criminal gangs more powerful than Haiti's state security forces have attacked prisons and the airports serving the country's capital, forcing businesses and schools to close and driving in an estimated 15,000 people from their homes in Port-au-Prince On March 12th, Prime Minister Ariel Henry announced that he would resign once a transitional presidential council was created, capitulating to international pressure as his country faced what some experts had already labeled a low-scale civil war. The UN top human rights official had warned days earlier that the situation in Haiti was beyond untenable, noting that more than basically 1,200 people had been killed since the start of 2024 alone. What's happened recently in Haiti? The latest episode of major violence flared up on February 29th as Prime Minister Henry flew to Kenya to push for UN-backed development of a police force to help fight the gangs. There are only 8,000 police members in Haiti. And if you don't understand why that's significant, there's 11 million people in Haiti. So 8,000 police force is not a lot for 11 million people. Anyway, prominent gang leader Jimmy Barbecue Cherezier announced that his group G9 was joining forces with other groups to force Henry to step down. On March 5th, with Henry still in his role, though not in the country, Cherezier warned that if the Prime Minister didn't resign and the international community continued to support him, quote, we'll be heading straight for civil war that will lead to genocide. Goes on to say, either Haiti becomes a paradise or a hell for all of us. It's out of the question for a small group of rich people living in big hotels to decide the fate of people living in working class neighborhoods. Okay. Right.
If you want, we can comment on this before continuing. Or...
Yeah. Why don't you?
Well, I thought it was interesting that he talks about genocide, because I'm not quite sure who he's going to genocide. Considering it's his own people that are in the country, and he's supposedly fighting for their freedom from oppression from the elite, right? So I wasn't quite sure what the statement. I think the statement is more showing it's a tactical statement, right? To just threaten the international community with this sort of claim. I don't think it's a serious claim.
Beware. It's like, beware, if you don't follow our demands, bloodshed will come.
Exactly. It's essentially actually holding the country hostage, which I don't think. I think it's just a method for power. I also think it's interesting how. Well, I would ask, but what do you guys think about this idea that the UN Security Council, where the small group of rich people are deciding the fate of the country? Does that ring true? Or
well, I think if we go more into the story, that'll clear up a lot of that like rich people thing.
Sure.
But I think the short answer, what I'll say is, it has its roots in the history of Haiti. I'll talk about it. I'll circle back to that question. I promise.
Yep. Okay.
So yes. Government corruption is at the root of Haiti's long-standing instability. The small nation has grappled with violent political unrest for 20 years, and there were powerful earthquakes in 2010 and 2021, which severely hurt residents. These latest round of attacks began when the Prime Minister, Henry, decided not to hold elections, which pissed off a lot of Haitians and sparked a gang uprising. The current crisis can be traced back to 2021, when the Prime Minister, Jovenel Moïse, was facing a mounting economic and political crisis as he led the country by decree without a democratic mandate and was assassinated. Henry was sworn in as Prime Minister soon after the backing of the international community, but his authority was never cemented as Haitians continued to grapple with soaring prices and crumbling infrastructure. Okay. I'm going to skip the part about who is Cherezier. Okay. 200 gangs exist in Haiti, and right now they control about 80% of the metropolitan area of Port-au-Prince. As of December 2023, more than 310,000 people have been internally displaced. More than half of them are children. This number has probably grown since then. Yes. Finally, I'll come to why Haiti is so poor in the history. So, number one, the U.S. worked to isolate Haiti after it was independent during the 19th century and violently occupied the nation for 19 years in the early 20th century. Also, when the U.S. officially left Haiti, it still controlled its economy until 1947 and gave away 40% of its economy to the U.S. and France. So it gets worse. Okay, also, in July of 1825, the French King Charles X sent an armed warship to Haiti to basically demand that Haiti pay the France reparations for freeing itself from slavery, which amounted to around $20 to $30 billion today. And it took Haiti, the Haitian government, 122 years to pay back this debt that was demanded of them because of their freedom. Now, this is important. Haiti, for those of you who do not know, the Haitian Revolution, which freed the Haitian Revolution, was the only successful slave revolt in the world. And it occurred from 1791 to 1804 against the French. Haiti at the time was a lucrative island because of the sugar and coffee and cotton. And at the time, 90% of the population of Haiti was slaves, mostly from Africa. And a little fun fact, Haitian Revolution caused Napoleon to sell what was known as a Louisiana Purchase to Thomas Jefferson because he needed extra money for his conquering Europe. So I think that Haiti's history, not just the fact that the U.S. and France had been taking a bunch of the country's money for a long period of time, but also the fact that Haiti is traditionally a nation of slaves, really, or now descendants of slaves, I think plays a big role in those comments that he's making about we're not gonna, like I think he's purposely echoing a lot of the sentiments of the Haitian Revolution when he says that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I was aware of the little-known fact, actually, of the Louisiana Purchase and the Haitian Revolution. Yes, well, mostly because Napoleon's involved. Yeah. So what's the question? I guess.
Well, that was an answer to your question.
Okay. Yes.
And also, I should say that the government has been accused of corruption for a long time, and not only not doing enough to stop the gangs, but also giving them money.
Yeah, and this is also the international governments, not just the government in Haiti, right? So here it says that it's talking about basically that the current prime minister is elected, but not really. And then there's even someone who found evidence that he's linked to the president's killing?
Yeah,
So maybe we should talk about this.
Yeah, so this is interesting. The current president came to power after the then president was assassinated. And somebody in the cabinet found evidence basically saying that the current president was linked to the assassination of the former president. And when he did that, that guy was fired. So it's plausible that this, and also this current president is backed by the U.S. and the international community, which I think has pissed off a lot of Haitians because they're like, this guy came to power in what was likely a scam. He likely killed off his predecessor to become president. Why are you giving him legitimacy?
Yeah, and this is also said by the U.S. Special Envoy to Haiti, right, Daniel Foot, when he resigned. So clearly, well, I don't know. You should speak more on the issue, but what should the U.S.'s involvement be here, and how does it go now when there's when he's still not being able to get back to the country, right, from his return trip from Kenya?
Well, here's the problem. He's resigned. He's not in the country. There's no government right now. The gangs have control of the airports, most of the metropolitan capital region. So there's gonna have to be some kind of, either there's two options I see. Either you go in with an international community. I think the prime minister had been asking Kenya to send police force to Haiti to help fight the gangs. So either you send in a bunch of people from the international community to fight the gangs, and there's a huge war in Haiti between the international police force and the gangs, or you make concessions to the gangs and strike a deal with them to stop the killing, stop the fighting, in exchange for doing what they ask in terms of who leads the country.
Well, I think there's probably another option, which I thought the US's response to this current situation, the one I read in the article, was probably the best response that you could give, which was to hold elections and to make sure that they're actually held properly. Because obviously you don't want to, I mean, what's justifying the actions of the gangs at the moment are obviously the injustices of the system, of the government, right, which is backed by the US and the other international community, right? So I think that would allow both for the establishment of a proper government, and they would also put an ultimatum to the gangs, right? Because if they want to continue their free way of life, which is to do whatever they want and have all the power, they would have to now do it against the freely elected government, right? They would actually have to say, well, that's actually not what we want, and they would be forced into making an explicit statement. I think that's the main concern, obviously, if you do agree that this prime minister was or president was an actual like bad factor. And I think he probably is, because not only do we have the history of Haiti, but we also have the fact that clearly he thought this was a good strategy to go to Kenya and get international aid in order to come back to his own country and use that to suppress the resistance. But obviously there's a problem there, which is that it's not so clear that he's even a legitimate ruler of the country, right? Yeah. So this just seems, and I'm pretty sure I read that they also asked him, the international community and the countries in Africa asked him, if they give the military aid, would he be willing to step down, because they know that he's not a very compromising figure in the country, and he said no, right? Yeah. And obviously now the gangs have taken their chance when he's outside of the country to act immediately, because that's the only time they could have acted. Otherwise, they would have been up against a more sizable military.
I think that's a good response. My only concern is, how do you hold elections and form a government when gangs have controlled 80% of the metropolitan area and the international airport and most of the country?
Yeah, so I think that's why it would have to be more like the one you said about compromising with the gangs. But it would be compromising not entirely on their terms, obviously, because you would have to say, well, you're not the government, right? There has to be a government. So we're going to fix your worries. But if we fix your worries, then you're not going to continue being so,
What would be interesting is to like, how the gang leader barbecue
Right.
said, if you don't do this, we're gonna basically we're gonna kill everybody.
Mm-hmm.
What if the international community said to them, well, if you don't do what we say, we're gonna send in like, you know, the Navy SEAL team, and we're gonna send in all these guys, and you guys are gonna be the ones shedding blood.
Well, I think that's probably not the way I would go about it. Just because I think the grievances that people have in the country is precisely the action of the international community in support of suppressing the Haitians. So there has to be this sort of idea of working with them. I mean, if they really control this much of the country, I mean, you can't really
Yeah.
I don't see this going well if you just go in and try and.
I
I mean,
don't-
they know
it-
their country better than
it's true.
any other army would.
And if there's one thing the US has learned over the years, it's they do not win guerrilla warfare fights.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me though. I don't think that's debatable.
No, I think that's a fact. I mean, just look at Vietnam.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though the willingness. Go ahead.
I was gonna say we should get President Lee to weigh in here.
Yes.
What? No. I'm just saying you could learn from the Philippines.
It's true. But I was gonna say, President Lee, if you were they gave you the reins to make the decision, what would you do?
Decision for what?
I mean, what do you do?
For what? What
What do you to deal with this issue?
what issue?
What issue?
What issue?
Well, the
The one we just spoke about for like 10 minutes.
the crisis in Haiti, right?
In Haiti.
But are you talking about the president of America or the prime minister of Haiti?
You're in a room.
Yes.
Yeah, but
But you just
what
named-
country
you
is he
just
the leader
titled
of?
me as
That's what
Yeah,
he's
I'm
asking.
gonna say,
Yeah.
you're part of the former government of Haiti. You're in a
Okay.
room with leaders from all across the world
Mhm.
and people high ups in the
Mhm.
Haitian government.
Mhm.
And they say, Mr. Lee, we want you to take control of this situation. Lead us. Tell us what you need us to do. Tell us what you need to do, and we will follow your orders. What do you do? What do you say to them?
Well, probably in that case, I will first make sure whether am still popular or not, whether I can still represent the Haitian people or not.
The non-gang people love you. They love
but
you.
It seems that from the record, most of people actually are gang people. If you're just saying non-gang people love me, then that's
No.
the minority.
Just because they control 80% of the country does not mean it's 80% of the population.
But I think he is raising a very good point, which is that we actually don't see the side of the normal Haitian person here. We're only seeing the
Yes.
side of the gangs and the government.
Well, I think 310,000 people displaced because of the gangs in 2023, and then probably more now. Probably they don't love that.
Yeah, and that's why I suggested that the best course of action would be one that's actually cutting against both the gangs and the government.
Besides, I think it's an internal issue. If I'm wearing the hat of the government leader or senior leader in the government, I would say it's an internal issue that if I'm asking for international help,
But
it
you-
may be the case. that
You
I'm-
don't have the resources to deal with this problem alone.
Hmm.
So you need help.
It's a very tricky question, I would say. And of course, that question is very worth to be asked because many people in Haiti are currently thinking about this thing. But I would say it's still an internal issue for people in Haiti to decide whether they would still love the current leader to lead them or to choose another leader.
All right, let me ask
Well,
you.
I think they clearly didn't.
Let me ask you a question. And this is a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's to illustrate the point. Let's say a missile is fired directly at you, directly at your country from a foreign country, and you're the president, and they're like, Anshan, what do we do? And you say, well, it's for the people to decide. It's an internal problem. Don't you see an issue with that?
Of course, of course. Well, when the
Well,
when the
I would
leader,
like to defend Anshan
yeah,
here because that's not the same case. I mean, you're suggesting that in that case the leader is actually the representative of the people because they've already chosen him as the representative figure. Obviously, the reason they're choosing that is because they cannot for every decision vote because they have to have someone who can take immediate action on these kind of situations. But here in this situation, we actually don't have that because the leader and the government has lost legitimacy. The gangs are operating on the basis of this, and that's why they want to gain legitimacy on this basis, and that's why I think also you need to see if they're actually if they're actually serious in that, right? If they're actually willing to form a government, well, not the gangs themselves, but if they're actually willing for there to be a government that's properly elected by the people, or if maybe the case of some of them, considering there's how many? Did you say like
Gangs?
200? Yeah, I
There's
mean,
200 gangs. Yeah.
yeah. So I doubt all those gangs are
and also
for the freedom of the Haitian people.
no, I think you just invalidly exaggerate the question into a scale that is in from my understanding of this report, it's an internal issue. But if there's a missile that is fired from an external
No, my
country,
point is just to say that this is a crisis.
it is
So
a
you don't always
crisis.
have time to gather every single person's opinion about what you should do.
But it is not an invasion.
It's not an invasion, it's true, but
Indeed.
it is a crisis.
And there's a
And in a sense, it is an internal invasion.
I won't say that.
You wouldn't say that.
How could an invasion be internal?
Well, I think this is the peculiar thing about the situation. I mean, if it's any other situation, right? Simply the government has lost control. There's rival gangs who have the control. They have the ammunition. They have the weaponry. So they would surely just become the new rulers, right? They would become the new government. But obviously here we have the pressure of the international community. And that's why the situation has become this sort of thing where they can't actually be the new government because then it would be a usurpation of power, which would be illegal. So
Yeah.
So my question would be like, to what extent, I think that this is also Anshan's point, is to what extent should other countries be involved in this, which is an internal affair of another country? And if they should be involved, exactly, like how should they be involved exactly? Should they be setting up an election? Should they be going in, as you said, as one of the options and trying to go after the gangs? Like what is the most prudent way of acting? I think that's the main question here. And I just find it really interesting that when the US is involved in other countries, sometimes we have this argument where if you go into a country, you have a dictatorship, we have a bad government, then you should remove them. I'm not going to name any countries, but I think some people could probably figure out what I'm talking about. But in some other countries where they're not, when they're maybe closer to the border of the US, they're the international policy seems to be different. It seems to be that you should actually maintain the peace instead of risking anarchy in the country. So is that an inconsistency maybe, or am I talking about completely different situations and they're actually like completely different reasons?
No, I think that's, well, yeah. I think there's a difference between you just don't like the leader and the country is literally in a state of chaos. Like I would say the intervention in Somalia was more justified than the Libya Gaddafi killing.
On what basis?
Well, Somalia was a failed state. I mean, there was.
So it was already in a state of anarchy, you would say. Like, it wouldn't change that much the state of the country to remove its government.
They didn't have government.
Well, to install a new one, let's say.
To just basically to like when there was mass killings in the country, I think it's more complicated than when a country goes in and removes a leader that they don't like in Iraq or in Libya, than to have an international community go in and to stop the internal bloodshed that is resulting from just complete anarchy and civil war in the country. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but I think it's more complicated in that situation. Because what do you if you're the international community, let's say you're the UN or whatever, and a country just of 11 million people is at complete civil war with each other, and people are just being murdered and displaced and like threatening to just kill the entire population. Do you just sit by and let it happen, or do you try to go in and be a mediator between the two sides and stop the bloodshed? Understanding that you could make it worse, but on the other hand, how much worse could it get?
Well, I think there's a big question here about whether, because people like talking about this international community, but when you're actually getting down to it, it's not
the
really
US.
right. It wouldn't just be an international community. It would be the so-called great powers, right? And even in most cases, it wouldn't even be all of them, right? It would just be the particular one which is at that moment affected by the current situation. And Haiti is obviously the closest to it. Even in the article, they say that how could this be happening 700 miles away from the U.S., which I thought was an interesting point. Like, why does that matter if we're just evaluating Haiti on its own merits? Obviously, we're not evaluating Haiti only on its own merits. And the reason maybe this got more traction is, again, we were talking about geography just before. This is more relevant for Americans being that close to Florida.
The other thing that complicates it more is Haiti has a history of U.S. intervention, and also not just U.S., but foreign intervention, leading to the country being in a worse position as a result of that intervention.
Right. I would say obviously the French history and
the French and the U.S. history towards Haiti have resulted in the country being much, much worse off. So then, why would the people then be like, "Oh yeah, U.S., please come in and save us"? I can't imagine that a lot of people would trust the U.S. to do that in that situation.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. If we're looking for, well, I guess that's one of the questions. What should the goal of the resolution be? Should it be for the benefit of the countries surrounding Haiti, or should it be for the benefit of Haiti? Right. Obviously, an ideal answer would be for both.
Yeah.
But the question is, how can you guarantee that? Because if it's not done by the Haitians, then it wouldn't really be legitimately for their interest, right? One would think, presumably.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm presuming too many things, but
look, it's a very difficult situation for a reason. I do want to move on because we've talked about this a lot, and we have other stories to get to. But I'll run through this very quickly because it's related. But El Salvador had the highest murder rate in the world.
And the best coffee.
Sure. Haiti has good coffee too. At 53 people per 100,000 in 2018, a new president comes in and basically loosens the arrest laws, decides he's going to arrest a ton of people. This was gang violence that they were having. And now it has one of the lowest murder rates in the world at 2.4. So it went from 53 to 2.4. But as a result, El Salvador has the highest incarceration rate in the world. Government arrest and detain more than 76,000 people belonging to gangs or being accused with gangs, and many people claim that human rights organizations claim that El Salvador has also arrested innocent people, but El Salvador, for people living, has gotten much safer. Government, there's also been accusations of torture and violations of freedom of expression in the prisons, which El Salvador has denied. Just to give you some stats about these things, El Salvador, as I said, murder rate is 2.4 per 100,000 people. It was 53. Jamaica has the highest murder rate with 53.3 per 100,000 now. In the US, that is 6.4. In the UK, it's 0.99. In China, it's 0.5. And in Bulgaria, it's 1.28. In terms of incarceration rates, El Salvador has the highest with 1.1. The US is 0.5. Cuba is second with 0.8. China is 0.1. And in the US, just to give you an idea of how El Salvador compares, in the US, among Black adults, that is 1.2. 2%, so higher than El Salvador. So what do you guys think about this? Really quickly, because we don't have a lot of time, but what do you think about this in comparison to the gang violence that Haiti is dealing with? Like essentially, they say they have a ton of gang violence, ton of murder in El Salvador. It's one of the most dangerous countries in the world. New president comes in and arrests a bunch of people, and as a result, the murder rate falls dramatically, but potentially a lot of people are in prison who are innocent.
Yeah, I would say probably a little bit extreme, in terms of how you would. I'm sure there was an easier, maybe less radical approach to this that he could have taken. But he certainly sent a message to the criminals of the country, and obviously he's very popular there. So, I mean, in that respect, you can't really argue like fully against it. But I guess that the main question really is this part of the article, which says that basically the police and the soldiers and their conduct has replaced that of the gangs. I mean, if that's true, then I don't really see any defense for what's happened because, well, I mean, the article has made it so there is no defense, right? if it's just a completely, if now you're just afraid of a different person, then there is no defense. But I'm not sure how true that is because obviously he's still very popular. So I don't really square these two things together, right? If they're just like a new gang, basically that has the oversight of the whole government,
Yeah.
then surely he wouldn't be that popular.
Well, it's who is he like? It's not women and children that he's like that they're arresting, right?
Well, sure, but I mean here they're claiming that every person is as scared of the police and the government's men as they were of the gangs, and presumably women and children and everybody else would have been scared of the gangs, right? Here it says the neighborhoods that once lived under the threat of violence by the gangs are now under the threat of the police and the soldiers who arrested people for looking suspicious. So this is not just people who, you know, might have known a gang member, obviously because it was very prevalent there. This is like normal, like even people who are maybe not that interested. So I think that if that claim is true, then I don't really see a viable defense for
that is interesting because
the conduct.
Earlier it does say he won the most recent election by a landslide. And it says it has also made the country much safer for residents who can now move around freely in neighborhoods previously controlled by gangs.
Right. So I'm skeptical of this claim. I would say probably the more interesting question, which is what most people are arguing about, is to what extent you can go with this, how many innocent people are being caught up in this, because if it's part of these neighborhoods and it's been so prevalent with like 76,000 people right involved, obviously not everybody would have been a stone cold killer, I would imagine. There might have been people involved in it or around it, right, who now will be put in prison as well. So I think that's a factor to consider. Also, it's quite well, it's quite funny that they say he's very popular. Obviously, a lot of the people who might have not voted for him are in jail. So, so that's something else. I mean, that's 76,000 people is not a small electorate.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm just thinking, William. Filip made a very good point here that the president though had won a landslide election. Landslide election. It is still questionable whether he is really that popular or not. But I'm just thinking maybe before we jump to the other topics, we can kind of link this topic to our first topic and the second one. That is, I have a question whether the end justifies the means, even if then for the president, then he achieved a significant reducing murder rate, but by ignoring basic human rights, such as they are arresting people based on mere reason that they have tattoos on their back. I don't think it's a very good reason for you to arrest someone. But comparing to other topics like the kidnapped children in Nigeria and the Hades, what are those limits? In what kind of extent should we should we protect other people's or other people in other countries' basic human rights? Could we just invade their countries, or what? Or if we cannot, what can we do?
Well,
So
I
yeah.
I will just say like 1.1 per 100,000 is high. It's high. It's the highest in the world, but it's not astronomically higher than other major countries. Like as I said, the U.S. is 0.5, so like half of it basically.
Yeah, so I think, as I initially said, like I don't think this was probably the most right way of doing it, but now that it's already happened, that's what I'm saying. Like now the question is how does the country go back to being normal, right? Because I don't think this state is a normal state for a country.
But back to being normal. I mean, before it was highest murder rate in the world and gang violence was heavily prevalent, so that's hardly normal either.
No, but I mean normal by our standards of not having such high criminals and gangs, but also not being so abusive of the system, right? Because it's not like they're hiding it. They're literally saying they are willing to sort of forego all these pleasantries, if you would, and to get right to solving the issue. So obviously that's also not something that you'd want the government to maintain for a longer period of time.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
From the perspective of it already having happened, obviously the question of should it have happened in the first place is different in my opinion.
Yeah, although I will say it just to play to his defense, the president's defense. Number one, it's not like we can say conclusively that he only arrested innocent people, because the fact that the crime rates have gone down so significantly means that at least some of criminal people were arrested. And potentially, just because you're arrested does not mean you are convicted. Those are two different things. So there is the potential to hold trials for the people that are arrested to determine whether or not they're actually guilty. Now, whether or not he's going to do those things and they're going to have a real trial is a different story.
Yeah, I think that's another great point, that we actually don't know what the situation is. Even in this article, we see like conflicting, in my opinion, reports of how popular he is and actually like how afraid people are of him. So I don't actually know what it is. But if we're presented with this dilemma of, ends justify the means, as Anshan said, and whether you should just forgo rights in order to get the most effective result, I think initially, like if you pose the question, it would have to be a no. Just because you don't want to set a precedent for the government just deciding to go towards some end and then using whatever means they want to achieve that end, even if in this case maybe the end was obviously beneficial for the country.
Yeah. These are another dilemma, although I'm not going to ask you guys what you would do if you were him, because that's a stupid question.
Well, I kind of think I already said.
Well,
just on very general terms what it was, but
you would look for other means to do it.
Well, I think he went with the most direct approach, which is not
Which was a little extreme.
Well, I mean, it sent the message, and I'm assuming there were some other things that he wanted to do with that approach. But
yeah,
but it is a bit extreme. But then again, in that region of the world, it's the politics of either, as we saw with Haiti already.
Which part of the world?
Well, the Latin American part, or the Caribbean as well.
Yeah.
The one we're in.
Why I think it's in Africa?
Oh,
what is?
God. Oh my God!
Well,
he just
El Salvador, well, Nigeria, but not El Salvador.
Oh,
El Salvador's it's next to like Guatemala and Honduras.
Yeah. He thought we were talking about African countries.
No. I'm well. El Salvador. I just thought it's a Latin American country, but I'm not very certain in which part of Latin America it is located in.
Central America.
Ah.
Yeah. Okay.
Two more stories.
Yeah, let's get to assist. We may not have time to do the Japanese tourism thing, but let's do the assisted dying. Okay, so this is from The Guardian by Francis Ryan. Okay. On Thursday, MPs published the findings of a 14th-month inquiry into assisted dying. The inquiry, which attracted more than 68,000 responses from the public, made no conclusive statement, but instead collected evidence as a significant and useful resource for future debates. Legislation is making its way through the parliaments of Scotland, Jersey, and the Isle of Man that, if passed, would enable competent adults who are terminally ill to be provided at their request with assistance to end their life. One study reported the euthanasia of a number of Dutch people who were said simply to have felt unable to live with a learning disability or autism. In Canada, assisted dying were legalized in 2016 only for those with terminal illness, but 5 years later, access was widened to those with chronic physical conditions, even if they were not terminal. Roger Foley, who has a degenerative brain disorder, told the New York Post he felt, quote-unquote, pressured into considering assisted suicide by hospital staff who raised the subject with him repeatedly. There are also reports that some Canadians have chosen to be killed in large part because of a lack of housing. To some, it is more legitimate to give a person in need lethal drugs than a home. During the height of the pandemic, some people with learning disabilities were given, quote-unquote, do not resuscitate orders without their consent. Women with learning disabilities already die on average 18 years younger than non-disabled women, with many of those deaths found to be avoidable due to unequal health care. Now that was an article, and then in response to that article, they interviewed just ordinary citizens to give their opinions. And I'm going to point out a couple of responses. So this is by Davida Hamilton of West Yorkshire. She says, Francis Ryan's point that it is hard to trust the state to help marginalized people die when they fail to support them to live will strike a resounding chord with all families caring for someone with a disability. That a human life is precious because it is human forms the basis of our laws and justice system. Some people have that understanding from a faith perspective, some not. It is, however, at the heart of this discussion. However, passing the assisted dying bill in Britain may well bring a sense of peace to some who are understandably very fearful of the process of dying, and it would be presumably a good financial option for the country. However, I have learned not to trust the state to care well for marginalized people during their lives, and I certainly do not want it acting as God in the end. Then Claire Peck says, many people dread, quote-unquote, being a burden, but if assisted dying becomes not only socially acceptable but expected steadily over time, then they could come to believe without any coercion that they ought not to be a burden and reach for an easily available solution. Lonely people, too, who feel they might as well die, could easily be persuaded that they should. After all, old age is a terminal illness, isn't it? Not only would they be an expense to the state, but the funding that at present goes to research into things such as Alzheimer's or chronic pain management could be diverted into some of the government's pets projects. I think she's saying that ironically, or yeah, she's against that idea.
I think this article by Francis Ryan was actually pretty good. It addressed like one of the main concerns with the euthanasia problem, which is that it's no small thing to hand over power of life and death to the state. And I think a lot of people might even not like me phrasing it that way, but I mean that is effectively what we're doing here with this, and there is a lot of these problems. So she makes, I mean, a number of arguments. There's the argument about marginalized groups and how the government doesn't actually like look out for their interest anyway. There's also obviously disability, autism, and all these things. And then there's also the slippery slope argument. I guess the one thing I would address immediately is that a lot of people were, in the beginning when people were talking about assisted dying, they were talking about the slippery slope and how it's obviously fallacious reasoning to say that just because in some extreme case, it seems intuitively like it's moral for assisted dying to occur. Like normally people would bring up some, extreme case where someone's comatose, they'll never like come back, or they're like in extreme pain and conscious during it, some sort of unbearable state of life, which is basically like equal to torture. And then they would use that case in order to say that assisting dying is moral. And whenever people would bring up these sort of questions about, okay, but in practice, would this lead to other forms of assisted dying? people would say, well, that's a slippery slope fallacy, right? But the problem is that the fallacy only occurs if there's no good reason to think that from one point A, you're not going to reach point B. And the problem is that they never actually, people who were in support of euthanasia, in my opinion, never actually specified what the distinction between point A, which would be the extreme case that they use, and all the other points are, right? I've never heard a cogent representation of what exactly is the demarcation between the one point and the other point. And because they have no demarcation, or at least I haven't heard one yet, that's why we have these problems. And now we see it also in the second point with the slippery slope problem, is that when you actually see it in a reality unfold, right, with these cases where they're progressing from one state to the next, well, then it seems even more likely. So my main point basically is that it's not enough just to say this is a slippery slope fallacy, because you actually have to explain why it's fallacious, right? It's not in every case that it doesn't work.
And I should say, we did do an episode on euthanasia with a professor here. It was, I don't know, interesting, I guess.
It was nice. I listened to it. I highly recommend you also.
Yeah, I am not a euthanasia supporter. Look, to be honest, my problem with assisted suicide lies in the name.
In what?
The name. Assisted suicide. Why should we be helping people to commit suicide? I don't get it. Like, just from my perspective.
Wait, I'm sorry for disturbing.
Yeah.
I'm just a little bit lost. Because can I just quickly explain what I know from a Japanese culture? That when a Japanese, I forgot the title of that kind of people, but if you're a warrior and you decide to suicide, basically you need someone to help you to chop your head down after you cut your belly.
Okay.
Because it's going to be too painful and it's going to take hours to die very painful and slowly, and therefore you need someone to help you suicide.
What's your point?
And that's first, it's a cultural thing and it's very common.
Okay.
And second, it's a very respectful thing. And
the question is, in what kind of cases would that be okay? Because I'm not as familiar with that cultural aspect. But like, I presume you wouldn't just be going to the grocery store and then deciding I'm going to cut my belly,
no.
right? So it'd be sort of military encounters, right?
I would say in the Japanese culture, it's a quite serious thing. But I'm questioning about your term that you think assisted suicide is problematic because you can't understand how would someone going to deliberately kill him or herself.
I understand why it can be useful to people. What I think is that we should not be helping people to kill themselves.
But I just provide you a counter example that there are in some culture, in some country.
Just because it exists does not mean I agree that it should happen.
Well, also, again, I don't know in what kind of case, because I don't know what we're imagining. I mean, if we're talking about like, I don't know, what was it, The Last Samurai, where one of the master, he cuts his stomach and then the other one like helps with the I mean, that's more like a killing.
If it should not be the case, then you are saying, if you're going to kill yourself, you should kill yourself by yourself per se, or you should not kill yourself absolutely.
I don't think you should ever kill yourself. That is my thing.
Oh, so that's your position.
Yes. I do not think you should ever kill yourself.
I see.
And
but I think the article is good because it doesn't even require you to assert a moral position on whether you should kill yourself or not, because the article is actually pointing out a bigger problem, which is that it's going from voluntary to involuntary euthanasia, right? So the article is actually more about the political and practical applications of euthanasia.
That's also, like, if somebody doesn't want to kill themselves, but they're willing to do it like assistedly, to me, there's a big problem with that. Personally, I feel that way. If you're not willing to kill yourself on your own, but you want somebody else to do it, to me, that person should not do it. I don't think so. And especially the state should not be involved in that.
Yeah, I agree with the second part.
But you think,
Well, sure. I would say as a generic idea, yeah, I would agree, because if someone comes to you and says, I don't want to live anymore, so can someone please come over and kill me? I mean, my first reaction wouldn't be send the soldier, right? My first reaction would be, maybe we should
Help
talk you
them.
out of it.
Exactly. Help them. Like, I think somebody made a great point. Instead of spending all these resources on trying to help them die, how about helping them to live?
Yeah, so I think practically that is the case. And again, it doesn't help here to focus on, because we can agree on certain cases that euthanasia is permissible, but the question is, in what cases, right? And how would you talk about this? And again, I would emphasize, before people would say this is a slippery slope argument, especially like the last thing where who was it, Claire Peck, where she talks about, old age is a terminal illness, right? So
It is.
she's going towards the more extreme positions in order to emphasize that we've already sort of started talking like this in terms of other things like mental illness. So
No,
I
but
think for me it's not extreme, or it's not what's the word here? It's not like so abstract or so unthinkable that you wouldn't even like consider it. I think once you give the state that power, then these sort of cases the door would be open to them occurring more, because death would not be such a taboo topic to talk about, right? And killing yourself would not be such a taboo topic to talk about. So I think the main point of the article, which was just to emphasize that this is actually a significant change in our society and that we should actually talk about its ramifications, is correct. And I don't think advocates of euthanasia should continue with this line of underemphasizing it and sort of saying, well, it's not that big of a deal. It's just for these special cases. Obviously, there's still the debate to be had about morality and whether it's permissible in any case. But I think practically this article sort of.
I'm coming from a belief that every life is sacred. That's just my belief.
Sure.
Right? So that's why I'm not for it. I want to ask you a question. You seem to, is it correct to say that you think that assisting suicide is a virtue in some cases, or is a good thing in some cases?
Well, I have to make myself absolutely clear in
Please.
the beginning that if I'm just taking a hypothetical example, in a hypothetical scenario, if I'm going to kill myself, then at least I'm deliberately allowing someone, in that case, myself, to kill myself. So if I cannot even empower myself to do that action, why should I empower someone else to deliver that action? I would argue that my will.
I think that was
that's exactly the point I was making.
I think you're in agreement on that.
No. The point is, I think what you miss, I would say what I disagree with you is not every life is sacred.
You don't believe every life is sacred?
I would say, for instance, my life is not.
That's a very dark thing to say.
Well,
should we get you? Should we?
The better question is what life then is sacred?
A sacred life is a life that is that could be immortalized.
That could be mortalized?
Okay. Yes.
And this is the old Greek idea of the immortal heroes and.
But I just want to talk about the assisted suicide stuff.
Wait. Can you just back up? Do you really not believe that your life is sacred?
No, I do not think I'm.
Wait. Was it that it could be immortalized, or that it already is immortalized?
It has a potentiality, I would say.
Well, then your life would also.
Then your life is sacred.
Because it has the potentiality of being immortalized.
I want to focus on the problem of the assisted suicide, because I think for the one who should deliberately will to deliver that act should be the one who wills most, and therefore I would say there's no assisted suicide. But if you want to have a dignified life, and also I would say basic human rights, of course, to live with dignity, but also to die with dignity. But how to die with dignity? Most people actually misunderstood. The most dignified way is to kill yourself, that to cut your throat, and that is most perfect way.
Why? Why? Tell me why.
Well, I don't know what I
Because
don't think
not
there is a
empowering
dignified
someone
way,
else,
but
you're empowering yourself. And if you even cannot empower yourself, how could you? Why do you want to put your belief and your trust on someone else?
No, but you said that killing yourself is the most dignified way of dying.
Yes.
Why?
Because you know the
Some would say that's an act of weakness.
No. It's
You're not willing to face the life ahead of you.
It's only because you have already know that the life in front of you is to deliver that honorable action, and you have the power to, and you have the will to empower yourself, not anyone else. So actually, it's a very dignified in a twofold way. One is
you're giving up on your life. How is it dignified?
Because in some scenario, that your life cannot be continued in a dignified way.
well, I think the question isn't even really about dignity, but if you guys insist on talking about it, we could. I personally don't think the question of the sanctity of life is to do with whether it's dignified to die
I don't
or
either.
not. I think you can die in a dignified way. You can also live in a dignified way. But I don't think that's even the question that we're talking about here.
I don't understand why is killing yourself more dignified than dying either trying to save somebody or trying or of natural causes. Why is killing yourself, taking your life earlier, more dignified?
Because we are talking about assisted suicide.
No, you said that killing yourself is the most dignified way of dying.
For instance, I know.
The most.
I know. For instance, I'm just taking an example. Now I have brain cancer, and I know my life won't last for more than 2 months. In that case,
you know that you can predict the future.
well, not me, but according to those scientific facts that the doctors told me, that I cannot live more than 2 months.
I have a family member. He's not blood, but he's by marriage, who they told him he had 3 months to live. He went back to the island that he's from in Greece and lived another 40 years.
That's a very beautiful story, but alas, I would say life is life. That is the miracle, but it is not the case for the majority.
Well, I don't know if we have that statistic, to be fair.
I'm talking
But
about,
you just said that you know for certain that you will die.
I'm just talking about for those people in permanent illness.
Yeah.
That if they want assisted suicide, that is, if they want someone else to help them to end their life, the first person they want should be themselves. They should empower themselves, have the will strong enough to deliver the action by themselves, not by someone else. That's the point what I want to make.
I agree with you on that. If you're gonna kill yourself, you should not get help to do it.
Yeah, I think you guys agree on that. He's just saying that you shouldn't kill yourself in the first place.
Yes, but do you really stand by that? You think that killing yourself is the most dignified way of dying?
Of course.
Why? Do you agree with that?
Do I agree with that? I mean, like I said, I don't think the whole question of dignity is even relevant to me. I think that's
okay. The most virtuous way of dying.
Well, no. If you talk about morality and an ethical system, I don't know
but
an
you
ethical
think so?
system that suggests that.
I think so. I didn't.
Really? What about the people in the life that are still alive who care about you and love you, are going to be deeply saddened by the fact that you take your life early and the grief that you're causing for them?
Well, if there's a call, then all you can do is follow the call.
What? I literally didn't understand what you just said.
I just want to make sure that I just want to make sure that if I'm going to die naturally, then at the very end of my life, I know I won't live for another period of time. At least I know I can't live for another 1 or 2 or 10 years of time. So in that case, I'm empowering myself to face a certain end of my life, and I have the courage and the dignity to face that point.
Some would say you lack the courage to keep living.
I'm saying that when I'm in permanent illness, I know even dying naturally, I know at one point my life is going to end at that one point. You agree with me on that?
My life is going to end at one point, regardless of whether or not I have a terminal illness.
Of course. But when you have a terminal illness and you know your life is going to be end very soon,
You know, I don't think you know. I know that 2 plus 2 is 4. I do not know that I'm going to die at that certain time.
Of course. I mean, based on those past experience and those scientific evidence, you use your reason inductively.
Okay, sure. Even if you do know,
Yes, thank
even
you.
if you do know,
Yes.
to me, I know people in my life who, even if they knew that they were going to die in
You
6 months, 3 months, whatever, I would want those 3 months left with them. I would be totally like, broken if they took their lives early.
then it is still a very dignified way
Why? Why?
because you have the courage and the because you can face the reality. That's it.
No, the
Because you know
reality
the
is
end.
the reality is to live out those 3 months and, die according to somebody else's will.
I don't want to make this conversation sounds like I don't want to mystify this conversation.
I would again, I would say the whole issue of dignity for me, I don't see its relevance.
Okay, again,
However,
virtue.
if we are to, I have never understood the case to be made that you're going out on your own terms. I mean, everybody's gonna go out not on their own terms. I'm pretty sure if anybody ever had like I think it's just it's like some sort of coping mechanism to say that you're gonna get there. It's kind of like I'm not gonna fail. I'm gonna fail intentionally
Yeah.
at the exam, and therefore I've not really failed because I did it on my own terms.
That's a
I think
great
that's
point.
I think that's kind of a ridiculous point in general. I don't think that's a positive way of doing anything.
I love that point, actually. That is a great analogy. It's like, oh, I try and I failed. But if I just
Right, if I get to the failure before life puts me there, then I've controlled it. But like when people say I don't want the terminal illness to dictate it to me, I think you can obviously I sympathize with them as much as I could, but because I've not had the terminal illness, that's what I mean. But it's again, it's not like everybody's gonna die at some point, one way or the other. In some cases, obviously, it's more drastic and more tragic, you can say, than other cases. But I don't really see that mentality as fully making sense. I think the better argument is obviously the one about suffering and not being a desirable existence and prolonging someone's suffering actually being a bad thing. I think you can make that case in those extreme cases which we were talking about. But then again, when you make that case, the whole question of how to implement it practically comes along, and then this article lays out, I think, the problems with the practical implication of that.
Yeah, I agree that if there is an argument for it, the personal suffering is the best argument.
Yeah, I think actual proper pain and suffering that you're continually enduring is an actual thing that we need to confront.
Yeah.
And that might put some of these questions to us. But I'm not convinced by a dignity or getting there first and controlling your own fate. I don't think you control your own fate. In that respect, I mean, nobody does it in the case of death.
Sometimes you can just foresee your fate, like that's a time point for you to end your life.
To be honest, I have no clue about the future. I am completely clueless when it comes to the future.
Well, I think even if you could see the future, like let's say, like they tell you when you're gonna die, I'm not gonna kill myself before that happens in order to prove wrong the person who prophesied that I'm gonna die. Then it's more likely what my reaction would be is to live the fullest life possible, knowing that at this age I'm actually gonna die. I'm gonna try and get everything I want to do done by that time. I'm gonna try and enjoy everything I want to enjoy done by that time. My reaction would not be to preemptively kill myself in order to prove to myself my own free will.
No.
Mainly because that kind of thing normally
Not to
actually
prove
goes
your
back.
free will, but disprove your free will by the very fact that you can kill yourself, because you know that's your fate.
How about proving yourself by living longer than what everybody says you're going to live?
I would say, before we
That's
end,
a completely valid point. Yeah, maybe you're gonna try and survive the the experience. I mean, that's a completely valid
I just
point.
want to
Yeah.
say that for fireworks, the point is not about how long it lasts, but about how beauty it could be.
How beauty it could be.
Well, I
beautiful
think that goes more to our point than
How
yours.
beautiful it could be. So when we are just imagine our life is like fireworks. We won't think, well, it's the fireworks that last for 1 hour. No, 1 hour's fireworks is boring. Who would like to smoke for 1 hour? Oh my God, there's smoking, smoking smell. What we, why do we like flowers? Why do we like fireworks? Why do we like those beautiful stuff? It's because they perish. It's because we value them by how beautiful they are, not by how long they could last.
Sure, but I don't think we value them because they perish on their own volition, right?
Of course, but they know that one day they will be perished. And same for human beings.
Well, they don't know anything because they're not like conscious.
Really, well, I'm just using this analogy to say that's the same.
And by the
for human
way,
life.
they come back in spring.
Of course, there are people who's going
So
to.
they don't give up when they're knocked down. They rise back up.
Yeah, I think these analogies, like I said at the beginning, are kind of not really gonna get anyone anywhere because I think people have different intuitions about these sorts of things and what's dignity and not dignity. But
All right.
we're gonna get to the last.
They may kick us out, but let's try to get this done. Okay. Really quickly, Kyoto in Japan has banned tourists from parts of the Geisha district amid reports of bad behavior. Residents of Japan's ancient capital have struggled to reconcile the financial boost and return to pre-pandemic visitor numbers with overcrowding and incidents of bad behavior among tourists. They previously tried fining tourists, but that didn't work, so now they're going to ban tourists. The number of foreign visitors to Japan soared 79.5% in January from a year earlier to about 2.69 million, and the largest number of travelers come from South Korea, Taiwan, and China. Although that might be controversial in and of itself.
Well, I mean the Taiwan province and the China country. Maybe you should edit that part. Wait.
Okay. Anyway, moving swiftly past the commentary on
should countries
on certain islands in the Pacific.
Yeah.
Well, it's Republic of China and People's Republic of China.
Sure. We'll let the people decide.
But still the same China.
Yes, guys, comment in the video.
Yeah, let us know what you think
your opinion is
about Taiwan and China. Okay.
So I guess who's for this?
I think countries should have a right to ban tourists.
Yeah, I'm completely for this. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't see any negative here. I think I kind of wish some countries did it. Who don't do it, who probably don't have enough. They probably want the revenue that comes in from the tourism.
I don't have any issue with it. If foreign tourists are acting up and degrading society, then yeah, why should they have a right to keep doing it?
Yeah, I think we've had this thing where now like tourism is kind of, obviously I don't want to overgeneralize here, but it is kind of like a one style thing where people are just going along with whatever they want.
Okay. Can we have like 5 more minutes? Yeah. Okay. So you were saying that sorry, what was your point?
What was my point?
Countries do have the right.
My point is that they should have the right, and my point was also that tourists have generally we've sort of, it's fallen out of fashion now because a lot of people travel everywhere. But I would assume back in the day it was much more prevalent that as a tourist you would have to actually get immersed in the culture willingly or unwillingly, right? Because a lot of times you just have to go to the country and sort things out. And also you would have to sort of learn what the respectful attitudes are in the country. And now obviously with tourism being much more prevalent and countries having like specific spots for tourism, it has sort of become that tourists bring with them their own ideas about conduct and they treat everything. I think I really like the line here where one resident said the neighborhood was not a theme park. And I think that's something that generally as someone visiting another country you should always keep in mind, is that obviously you're excited about seeing new things. and things you've seen in movies or something in your life, but you have to keep in mind that these are actual people
Yeah.
and an actual heritage and culture, so you can't just act out. I think a lot of people, because they've sort of gotten used to because as a tourist, you're kind of like, outside of your country. You're kind of like, it's kind of like a field trip when you go outside of school. So you kind of start becoming a bit more unruly and doing whatever you want. But obviously, that's not how you should view things as a adult.
Well, also, just because you're paying money to travel and to stay at a hotel or whatever, does not mean you get to like trash the place.
Yeah, that's another thing. Obviously,
You
some
know?
people think that especially in poorer countries, when they go there, they would think that they have some sort of a. Obviously, nobody would say this outright, but it's definitely subconsciously like you're paying a lot of money to stay there.
And to me, it's very wrong on the part of the people who are doing it because, number one, like particularly with poor countries who rely on tourism for their industry,
Yeah,
like
they can't allow
it's
this.
like you're just like taking advantage of the fact that they can't put anything, like if they put limits on tourism or stopped tourism, they would suffer severely economically. So you're kind of like
and they can't
taking
allow
advantage of them.
They can't allow themselves to do what Japan,
Yeah.
for example, has done.
Yeah. Anshan, do you have any difference of opinion?
Well, to have a different opinion, I need to form a different argument.
That is generally how it
I think
works.
we
would
are
say-
running out of time.
No,
Yeah.
yes. I would say William made a fantastic
William made a fantastic
No.
point. Okay.
Okay,
Oh
we're
my
gonna
God.
end it on William's fantastic point.
No, it's Philip. We know it's our beloved Philip.
So you agree with Philip and me?
Till the time point, yes.
Because of time, you agree with us, but in principle, you don't.
I didn't say that.
Okay, but
Oh,
yes
I-
or no? Do you agree?
Yes and no, yes.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
So you don't have an opinion. Great. Okay. We're running out of time, so we're going to stop there. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you both. Subscribe, please. And stay tuned. Stay sexy, America. No, just kidding.
Wait.
What the fuck? What the fuck? Oh my god.